Welcome to Midlife Mastery. I'm, of course, Brock Edwards, and midlife is a fantastic time to take on new hobbies or return to those that really interested us when we were younger and we just got away from. In midlife, we typically have a bit more time, money, opportunities, and resources than we did in our 20s and 30s, and hopefully a bit more wisdom as well. And so it becomes a great time to take up those new hobbies, return to the things that we were excited about. And riding horses is one of those passions that often gets set aside early in life. But what if you could pursue that now that you're in midlife? Where would you even begin? Fran Severn has created a website and a book, both called Riders of a Certain Age, Your Guide for Loving Horses, Midlife and Beyond. And they're focused on helping navigate starting out with horses in midlife. So just like it sounds. And although Fran's expertise is in the horse world, much of what we discuss really also applies to taking on any new hobby later in life. So for example, we talk about overcoming the fear of being a beginner and becoming comfortable and confident, the benefits of community, myths about writing when you're older. What are those things that we kind of think are true but really aren't? Some ways to minimize costs while deciding if you really want to pursue it or not, and different levels of expense. You can go all in, or you can go in a little ways, and we talk about what that might look like. And so, if you're ready to play bigger in midlife, let's get started. Today's guest is Fran Severn, the author of Writers of a Certain Age. And today we're really, well, everyone, if you've been listening for any length of time, you know I'm a bit of a sucker for people who are taking on new challenges in midlife. And so recently we had Tad Stahl on. That episode was called As Seen on YouTube, where he got into go-karting later in life. And it is a family thing, and great conversation with him. A few episodes before that, we had Jackie and Ray Hart talking about climbing midlife's mountains. At 50 years old, they decided to become mountain climbers. And I just love that enthusiasm and taking on that new challenge. And so, Fran, your focus is really on horses in midlife and beyond. So tell us a little bit. I mean, what inspired you to write a book, create a whole website around it, create resources for people?
I was one of those kids that was the horse nut. Growing up in downtown Baltimore, there weren't horses. My mother did have Aunt Alice, and it was Aunt Alice, not Aunt Alice. And she had horses. She lived up in Baltimore County. But about the time I realized I was alive, she'd sold the farm and didn't have horses. So I don't know. I think there's a gene that you just are born with. And I'd always wanted horses, never had a chance to ride. After I graduated from college, the first job I had, which was in Steubenville, Ohio, which is not all that far from Weirton, West Virginia, or from West Virginia, in a park that had horse riding. So I go down there and take lessons. And then I got a job in Louisville, Kentucky. Yes. And rode there, but it was just always in the background. Then when my son was born and was in school, and it was job, husband, house, all the other things that happened, and horses were not even a player. And it wasn't until I was in my late 40s and my husband got a job down here on Maryland's Eastern Shore. And I realized that there are horses here. And I was finally able to start taking lessons and ride. And I realized that as an older person getting involved in horses, I didn't have the background, the kids that were raised with it, or people that rode in their 20s, or that had children who were riding and they were the horse moms. And I realized how little I knew, and got onto some social media sites that are specifically for riders of a certain age, that kind of thing, and began to see the same questions coming up over and over again. And some of the answers were, yeah, that sounds good. And others were like, oh my God, please don't let her try that. And I just began to respond to a lot of these things, and then realized maybe somebody needs a guide. And that's how it all got started.
Yeah, so that's daunting when I think when I think about taking on new challenges in midlife. And something actually even listeners who have been with me for a while probably don't know. So my wife and daughter are involved in horses, and we live on a horse property. And anyway, without going into all the details, I just from the side know how much is involved in it, and taking on any new hobby is challenging. But when I think of all that goes into horses, if you go all in, now I know there's multiple levels. So Yeah, so where does someone even get started if they're just thinking like, wow, horses sound great, but I don't know. I want to try them out.
Yeah.
Where do they get started?
Ask around. There are many ways to find stables wherever you live. You can do internet searches. You can stop by a feed store, a place that sells horse stuff. Those are probably good places to start. Find a place that offers lessons. Ask, call, go out there, look it over. Tell them you're a beginner, you're an adult, and you can kind of get a feel for the different places. Some place that's a very serious competition barn, probably you're not going to be welcome at. Or I wouldn't say, well, you wouldn't feel comfortable necessarily. And, a place that has a good kids program is geared towards beginners, and they will be very happy with an adult beginner. And you just kind of ask around, take a few lessons, a couple here, a couple there, until you find your tribe, as they speak. And that's probably the best place to start. If you know some people that have horses, or you see a place and you drive down the road and you see horses in a field, knock on the door, ask, and you just kind of do some scouting around. It's not that difficult, really. Or go online. As I said, there are many groups that are for riders of a certain age, aging women, aging horseback, older horse riders, and check and see if you can find somebody in your area. You could do a search for where you live. I would do a search for horseback riding Maryland Eastern Shore, and stuff will come up. Groups will come up.
And that would probably be great advice for any hobby. Start looking
Absolutely.
around, start talking to people, get on the internet. Now, one of the challenges that I see, and it sounds like you experienced as well, and got started helping people with, is figuring out what's good information, what's bad information. Because there's so much information. You
Yeah.
get on the forums, you get on the social media, and some of it is very, very good. And there are people just willing to give of their time and knowledge. And some of it may be well-meaning and is completely wrong. And I mean, and it takes time to just kind of
Yeah.
amass enough knowledge to be able to figure that out. But of course, when we're talking about horseback riding or anything with a danger element, you want to kind of vet that stuff pretty quickly to figure out what the right answers are. So I don't know,
Well, that
is there, oh, jump in, please.
no, that's really what your instructor is for. If you're getting started, find an instructor, find someone who's going to teach you how to not just walk in, the horse is saddled and ride. Find some place where you're going to be taking care of the horse. You're going to lead the horse. You're going to learn how to be safe around horses, how to groom, and you get a better bonding with the horse anyhow. They all have amazing personalities. And that's really when you're with an instructor and a group, they're going to be giving you the information to make it a pleasant experience. I know a lot of people, they look at Hollywood and they go, oh my God, the horse is going to roar, or it's going to buck, or it's going to do this, or it's going to run off with me. And that's Hollywood. I have had no horse that was a kicker. Rarely have I had a horse take off. And that's usually because something happened that startled it. And, a good instructor will teach you how to do a one rein halt and all that. But people don't get thrown that often. Don't do, yes, it is a risky sport because you're willingly climbing on 1,000-pound animal that has his own opinion about things. But most schooling horses in particular, they've been training people since gasoline was $1.50 a gallon. There's nothing they haven't seen and done. And no instructor worth their salt is going to put a beginner on a horse that's going to do something dumb and get them hurt. So a lot of it's justifiable because we are older. We don't know what we're doing. As our lives have gone on, we've tended to become experts in whatever it is we do, be it our job, running the house, whatever. Now we're in an area where we don't have the answers and we're out of our comfort zone. And that's where the anxiety begins to rise up.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And we're also kind of perhaps at an age where no one wants to feel foolish. No one wants to
Yeah.
feel like the newbie, the beginner. And yet that's just part of the learning curve as we're taking on new things. So,
Well, and part of it, if you have a chance, if you're at a stable that has a kids program and you're just a raw beginner, just you're learning to sit the trotter post, whatever. Taking a group lesson with kids is great because they have so much enthusiasm and they don't care that you're older. They're on horses. This is fun. And the kids' enthusiasm often is just, oh, it's just contagious. And most places, if there are older people riding, they'll try to get you together. Often, if there's a kids program, maybe the parents don't ride, but you get to know the parents. So you begin to get a little community and some friends going. And I think for older people like us, having that extra community, those extra friends is and those extra contacts is tremendously important and beneficial.
That is a nice thing, at least that I found in from my own experiences from people I've talked to, is that sense of community. That it, although it's daunting to be the new person, I almost never run across anyone who isn't just willing to completely help. They're just so pumped you were there and
Oh yeah.
excited that you want to do what they find
and,
exciting.
and they absolutely want to tell you everything about their horse and everything they do. And there's one young lady I know that she works. She has her own job. She's a teenager, but she has her own job, and she has color coordinated saddle pads and leggings for her horse. And she'll dress. She and her horse are color coordinated. She must have 15 different outfits, but she'll tell you about everyone and each horse. And this horse is like that. This horse, and they're so excited to talk about their horses. And if you go online with the various groups, everyone will be, let me introduce myself. Here's my horse. Here's the picture. Here's what we do. Here's where we go. And it's just wonderful. It's just this enormous community.
So, what are some of the, I mean, you already mentioned one time about, how the Hollywood view is not quite reality's view, like in anything. So, what are some of kind of the myths versus the realities of getting started with horses? I mean, there's upsides, there's downsides, and where do you find people kind of come in with an idea that just doesn't match?
I think part of it is, the horses are going to be so dangerous and it's going to be so difficult. Other people will say, well, I'm too old. I've got creaky knees or bad back, whatever. Those are things that can usually be worked around. A lot of times it's exercise and fitness that'll work that around. I think people do not understand how much time this will suck out of your life. It's particularly people who own their own horses at their own place. And they'll say, gee, I did this because I thought I'd have more time with my horse. But by the time I get done doing all the chores and the maintenance and the feeding and the this and that, I don't have any time to ride. And just how time consuming it is. And a lot of that is willingness. You're happy to be that involved. But if you've got a lot of other things on your plate, that will be it. The cost is another factor. We touched on that briefly, particularly as we get older and our finances change. It is very important to sit down and take a really good look at your financial picture. And that would be a good advice, regardless of what hobby you're in. When I was researching the book, I was startled at how few people have ever sat down and really planned the latter part of their life. Even if you think you don't have the money, sit down with a financial planner who will go over everything you've got and everything you might have and help you make sure that your later years are comfortable with or without horses, no matter what you want to do. And I think that's a critical thing that a lot of people don't think about. And then they get themselves in a box and a lot of dreams get undone.
Well, that's certainly really good advice. And particularly, I guess what I found is that buying into a new hobby is expensive, but the ongoing of the hobby completely dwarfs whatever it costs to get into the hobby. And I know there's all kinds of levels involved, but I guess what are, just, and every area is different, every location is different, but kind of ballpark, what can people expect this would cost for them to get into it, kind of the different levels of getting into?
Yeah, I would always recommend people take a lot of lessons before you think about leasing or buying a horse. That way, if you decide it's not for you, you're not stuck with something you can't sell. Lessons will vary about community, the rider, the reputation of the trainer, where you live. I'm going to guess nationwide, a lesson will be plus or minus $50 an hour. Around here, it's cheaper. I think I'm spending 35 or something like that for my lessons. But there are some places that it's higher depending on where you are. So if you figure it's 50, if it's lower, you're in good shape. You can buy more carrots for your horse. If it's higher, you're not shocked. So that's it. You have to buy your basic riding gear, which would be a good pair of riding boots. You don't have to get the fancy high boots. Western riders are easy, or even English riders to a bit. Cowboy boots work, but there are companies like Ariat that they sell that kind of look like hiking boots, but they've got a bottom one and that's good for riding. That'll be under $100 or around that, depending on what you get. Your riding kit for Western, it's jeans. English, you're going to need breeches because the seams don't sit right for Western. But again, you go to companies like Smart Pack, which is they're a massive company. They started off selling supplements and now they sell everything you can imagine. And you'll find breeches that are $50 to $100 that are totally acceptable. Your blouse is whatever you want. You will wear safety helmet, period, no discussion. Those will run you, $100 or so, but what is your head worth? For Western people who don't like to wear the riding helmets because they don't look Western, there are companies, there's a thing called a hell hat. And there are companies that make them, or you can make your own, and you basically cut out the crown of a cowboy hat, you put in the hard hat, and then you super glue it. And you can go online and look up how to do it. The caveat there is that there's no warranty on the hard hat once you've done that because you may have structurally damaged it. But it looks like a Western hat because it is. It's just a hard hat instead of a crown. But I'm absolutely no discussion about the safety factor of wearing a hard hat. Some people are wearing safety vests. I believe eventers, the people that do the cross-country racing, they're required to wear them. You'll see if you watch rodeos, an awful lot of the bull riders are wearing them now. And that will protect your chest if you fall. Some of them, they offer, when you come off, they also go poof, and they protect your head. That's a good investment. So, the basic stuff, a few $100s. And then if you want to get more into it, you want to get a saddle, depends on what riding you're doing. And a horse prices can be anywhere. If you go to a reputable rest that will require you to work with them and take some lessons with them, make sure it's a good match, you could get a really nice horse for $1,000, $1,500. On the other hand, if you're into some serious competition, you can spend 30, 40, or in between, 5 to 15, depending on what you're looking for and whether or not you want to compete. And those prices can be all over the place. Right now, they're as high as real estate prices. A year from now, they may be dirt cheap. So you keep your ear out. Do not look for a horse on your own. They will know you are a newbie. They will know you are going to fall in love with every horse, and they will come up with lines that make those emails, "We have $1 million waiting for you" scams look legitimate. Go with somebody who knows what they're doing, and even they sometimes get caught out. I've been lucky. I haven't been caught yet.
No, there is definitely something to that. And I like the emphasis on the word reputable.
Yes. If they are reputable, they will be a registered charity. What is it, a 501c3 or whatever it is? They will be a reputable charity. You will find people who mean well and take in horses and try to rehab them. But sadly, often they are people who are going to spin you a story and sell you something that they shouldn't have.
Well, and I know the temptation starting out, and this is in a lot of hobbies, to get just something cheap, not recognizing that there's a price point below which it stops being cheap and stops being effective.
Yeah.
And
vet bills are scary.
Yeah.
Oh my, as you know, because your family rides, vet bills are very scary. But it's worth it. But as I said, spend a lot of time taking lessons and hanging out. And then you will know what kind of riding you want to do, what kind of people you want to be with. And then it's a much more positive experience for everyone.
Well, what are some of and you've touched on this a little bit already, but some of the myths that older riders face?
The main one is your doctor saying you're too old to do this. We usually say that's nice. Oh, you've got a knee replacement. You'll never be able to ride again. Watch me. I think that, and to be fair, your doctor has to worry about you. It's Roy Rogers who said, when you're young and you come off a horse, you bounce. When you're my age, you splat. And, it's as we get older, we do have weaker bones. So osteoporosis, that's more of a chance of something getting broken. I think that's the main myth, is that you're too old. It's not healthy. My hero was Connie, and oh heavens, I've forgotten her last name. She went out for her daily ride at the age of 101 on her, quote, frisky horse named Dr. Pepper. And when she asked him to canter, he bucked and she went flying. And as the EMTs began to medevac her away, her quote was, "Somehow I'd hoped that my last dismount would not have been so dramatic." She never rode again. But you can do as much as you can for as long. I mean, Lloyd Bridges was riding well into his 80s, and there was, so it's your decision to keep going. And I think the biggest myth is they're too big. I should be afraid because this is really something new and it's really for younger people and I might get hurt. And I think those are the biggest myths. Fear, anxiety are two of the biggest things I hear. And there's a certain amount of that is common sense. You're getting on something that's 1,000 pounds and might decide to do something, and you may not completely know what you're doing, which is why you should ride with an instructor for a long time. And it is a new experience. We at our age are used to being in control because our lives have been built around things that we understand the system and how to control. So it's a new experience, and the anxiety is totally normal, and yet we won't stay away from horses. That's why I say it's an addiction. Common sense may say I really shouldn't do this, but I can't stop myself. It's kind of like me with chocolate.
Well, what are some other things that kind of those who are interested? And I know we're kind of circling some of these
Yeah.
ideas. There's just so much out there about horses, and as you're trying to take on a new hobby, some of the other things that kind of those new to it should be aware of, or just kind of keep in mind.
I think we've largely touched on a lot
Okay.
of that. It's think about, go out with the idea that you're here to have fun. You're not trying to prove anything. You don't need to, plan that, oh, well, if I have a horse, I have to ride, I have to compete. There's a whole new group that's starting, and this may be for people that have some anxieties. There is a non-ridden equine movement that started in England. The lady was a competitor, and her horse was injured. And she decided rather than find another horse, she'd do things on the ground with this one. And that has become a huge movement. I think the last time I checked their site or their little group, they had over 20,000 members, and that was a couple of months ago. And it's called the Non-Ridden Equine. And you could just hang out with the horse. You can teach them agility, like dog agility. They have dressage in hand so that you're doing all the great movements in hand. You could go for trail walks, just take the horse for a walk. A lot of people, if they've got land, they will open up their property to be a sanctuary or a retirement home. Any sanctuary or shelter is thrilled to have somebody come and help groom the horses, learn how to do the feeding, that sort of thing. And that's another option that people can enjoy the horses without having to ride. I'm very startled when I hear people say, well, if you're not going to ride a horse, you shouldn't have the horse. Horses are there to be ridden. No, actually, we've asked them to let us ride them. And by the grace of their furry little hearts, they let us. And I just think sitting in the field one day, just watching the horses is just, horses be horses. It just is as much fun as riding often. So those are, the other things that people can do.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I didn't know that movement existed and yet I know people who, for whatever reason, are kind of past the point where they're comfortable riding, either from past injuries, just don't have the funds to maintain a full, go compete kind of thing, but still love being around the horses and love being involved. So that's kind of cool to see.
There's also, if a place has a kids program, you could also check with like 4-H, which always has equine programs, and get involved with being a 4-H person. Or if they have a kids program and you get to know the owners, you're going to just walk in and do things. A lot of times they'll have some kind of a summer camp, and maybe you could do the arts and crafts while the kids are riding. But there are ways to get involved that way as well. It's funny when I was writing this about, we're doing things older now. And so much of the research on what people can and cannot do are based on younger people. All of the official studies and the fitness programs and all of that, they're all skewed towards roughly 30-year-old, relatively healthy men. And now they're just now beginning to explore what any older person can do, male or female. And I kind of think it's probably because all the researchers are getting close to Social Security age themselves. And that's what they're doing. And there seem to be no limits. One of the issues that does come up frequently is balance, which is important as we get older anyway. And there have been some fascinating studies on how easy it is to train your body to rebalance itself. And one of the easiest things, I do Pilates, and my instructor says, as you get older, you tend to look down at your feet as you're walking because your proprioception, your peripheral vision, and a lot of your sensory things very slowly start to decline. So you're compensating without even realizing it, that instead of looking straight ahead and walking, you tend to look down at your feet, which further reduces your peripheral vision. And it also throws you off balance because you're leaning forward. So you're more likely to fall. And I give her a hard time because I was thinking one day, look straight ahead, and promptly tripped over the edging of my flower bed and went flying. I said, it's all your fault. You know? But just those little things is to go online, learn some of the balance exercises. There's a gazillion things online, most of which are done by like physical therapists and all, and start to do those things, and they will make you feel more confident overall, because falling is one of the biggest dangers for older folks. So that any kind of balance and training in those regards, that makes you feel more comfortable and more confident overall. And I like that.
Well, I love dispelling the myth that as we get older, we need to become more sedentary, that we need to, get out the rocking chair or whatever the stereotype is. And that not only can we be active later and later into life, but that there's really no reason not to be.
Yeah.
And so what is it about now, and this is an aside, but what is it about horses? Now, because you mentioned there's kind of like this horse gene that some people are just like, they're drawn to horses.
Yeah.
And other people kind of discover them. So what is it about the horses that you and the people especially those that get into it later in life, are really drawn to?
There, that's part of what I did when I was writing the book. I was like, what is it with women and horses? And the real studies have been done on like teenagers. But its horses represent independence, a positive, it's a partnership. You can force a horse to do things, but it's never happy. It's a partnership, it's independence, it's unconditional acceptance, that a horse doesn't sit there and judge you. It's going to judge you by how you treat it. And the studies indicate all creatures have an electromagnetic field that works at a frequency, because we're all frequencies according to the quantum physics people. And the horse's natural frequency is very close to what we call the alpha frequency, which is our frequency of being completely relaxed and at peace. And horses tend to emit that, which is one reason why they're so good with therapy, with special needs people, with PTSD folks, because there's this calmness. And I think that women, primarily women, I know the guys are listening too, but because we're expected to always be giving and giving and giving and giving and doing, it's just the way our society is kind of skewed, that to be able to go to something that simply accepts us and gives us a sense of independence and self-reliance and self-esteem, that horses just do that. And I think that's part of the attraction, is that when I am around my horses, I just feel enveloped and safe. And I think that's a big part of it. That said that women will gravitate toward trail riding, dressage, which is a quieter type of competition. It's more the balance between you and the horse, the communication, and the sanctuaries, those kind of things, where guys tend to be more hot wired to do the more competitive stuff, rodeo, eventing, really serious show jumping. And the one quote I read, it said, men like riding, women like horses. No, I know all the men are going to start writing me nasty notes now, but I do tend to see that it's that kind of difference in approach.
That's fascinating. That is a very interesting distinction there, liking the
Hmm.
riding versus liking the horses.
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty cool. I hadn't thought about it that deep. I mean, I just know that some people really, really like horses that way. But I, looking at it from the kind of outside position that I inhabit, I'm around horses all the time, but I'm not a horse person, but I like having horses around.
Hmm.
As you mentioned, they're beautiful to look at. They're, it's and typically when you have horses around, you're out in the country, which I prefer being out in the country. So that's nice too. The
Hmm.
scenery is good, but just kind of that, I don't know, a chance to step aside from your normal daily life and to go
Yeah.
into this totally different environment
Yeah.
that really mirrors like nothing in daily life.
You know, when you are riding, you and the horse must mind meld. And in order to do that, you have to throw everything else out. The rest of your life has to go away because horses will very much pick up on your feelings. If you are upset, if you are tense, if you are whatever, the horse picks it up because go, well, she's upset. I better be too. What's her problem? And to learn to relax and just, when you're riding, that's it, just the two of you. And that does make the rest of the world go away, even if it's for just that hour or so that you're there. Can make such a big difference. And as I said, that's one reason why they are so used in so many therapeutic settings.
Yeah, that's, I don't know, that's fascinating. I can totally see that.
No,
Just,
there's something else that you mentioned, what
oh
people
yeah.
don't think about with horses if you're getting into them. If you have a horse, unless you want to spend your entire life board it, because it's twice a day, all weather, all climates, all everything, that horse has to be fed. That stall must be mucked. And I think people kind of forget that, you can't go on vacation because there's no kennel. So you have to realize that is a great commitment if you are going to take that horse and take care of it yourself, which is why I have always boarded. Also, you have to have a tremendous knowledge of feeding and looking at a horse and first aid, and can you tell if your horse is in the early stage of colic or whatever. And I don't have that knowledge, and I would always be terrified that I would miss something even if I studied, and I have taken many courses. So that's always good to have, work with somebody who really knows what they're doing.
Definitely so. And that is, that's one of the things. Like I've been getting into go-karting, and
Oh,
right now in Texas, it's, the feels like temperatures pushing 114.
yeah,
My go-kart can sit in the garage weeks at a time, does not need my attention.
that's right.
My
No,
wife's horses, no, they need attention.
yeah,
Uh,
that's right.
and so,
No,
and
what you need to try, have you tried street luge?
no,
Oh my God, it's too much fun to be legal. You're basically on, like the snow luge,
yeah,
except this is kind of like almost like a skateboard on steroids. And you're
okay.
in leathers because you just lay there and you just luge down a hill on a street. And that is too much fun to be legal. And it is
Oh,
so finely defined that I was doing a magazine article about it. If you just the slightest tilt of your head, because they're crashing into the bales, and the guy says you're looking too late, and just barely turn your head, and you're just, oh, it is too much fun to be legal. You must try this. It's street
oh.
luge. You must try it. It is.
Mhm.
It is. Again, you're too old to do that. Well, I'm only 6 inches off the ground. I can't hurt myself.
Well, that's fantastic. I'm gonna have to look at that. That sounds really cool because I always like. I mean, that was a sport in the Olympics that I watched, was the luge. That just
Well,
looked
I
so much
I
fun.
did get a chance to try it a few years ago up at one of the ski resorts in Pennsylvania. And it was very simple, and that was a lot of fun. And they actually had some people there from the Olympic team watching kids, and kids that seemed to pick it up. They were talking to the parents and asking them if they wanted to come up to, what is it, Lake Placid up in New York, and have like a weekend seminar with them. And they were at that young age were recruiting people, and that is just is so much fun. I watched them on the Olympics and go, these people are crazy. They're absolutely crazy. But I understand the fascination and the thrill of it.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we're talking about here, right? Those things that you saw
Yes.
early in life that you're like, that looks awesome, or even catch now, didn't even know it was a thing, and then you hear about it. It's like,
Oh
I'd love
yeah.
to try that. And somewhere out there is, like, I always used to joke that there's no group so small that they don't have a magazine and a convention. Like,
Absolutely. Oh God, absolutely. Absolutely.
And yeah, it's out there now. Of course, it's a website and all that. But yeah, so one of the things, Fran, I really appreciate about this conversation is really the focus on just getting started with it, because it can be overwhelming of, I've got to go buy, turbo diesel pickup and a trailer and property.
Oh,
And
that comes the second year. Yes, the first year is just getting into it and seeing if the bug really bites. And then the second year is deciding if you want to buy or lease. Leasing, I've never quite understood, because you pay all the bills, you just don't own the horse. So if the lease ends, you're without anything. On the plus side is, if you get into it and you decide this really isn't for me, you're not stuck with a horse you have to sell. And then, I would recommend taking lessons a year or so before you really decide if you want to buy something. In some cases, that's a movable deadline there. And then you get then you get the truck and trailer. Not that I did anything like that. And then you go through a series of trucks, and they all have names and special, vanity license plates that has your horse's name on it. And you kind of trick out the inside of your trailer's dressing room, so it's really cool for you. And it can get kind of silly, but hey,
Well, you already mentioned the young rider with 15 outfits that match the horse. So why shouldn't the truck and trailer match as well?
Absolutely.
Right?
Well, what happened was, I was going to buy the truck and trailer because I had a Jeep Cherokee that wasn't going to haul anything heavy. So I'm going out to buy myself my Dodge, my Rosie the Red Durango, and I was buying my trailer. It's a company called Equispirit, which is really, they design their trailers around what's best for the horse. And I'm calling it, and they said, well, it's white and it's got this, a strike. I thought it's fine. And I happened to mention I was buying this truck, and they said, what's the color of the truck? I said, it's Dodge, it's red. And they said, send us the color code so that we can match the stripe. So I drove down with this red Durango with the red stripe and top exact match. I got more compliments. That's a really great looking rig. Yeah. And then at 195,000 miles, Rosie died one day on the interstate at 3:00 on Christmas Eve. I was able to coast over to the side of the road, and it was 6 hours before the company was able to find somebody who would tow me, because it was Christmas Eve. And when I bought a new truck, just by coincidence, it was also red. So I said, okay, this is good.
Nice.
Horse people can get a little silly about things.
Well, they're not the only ones. We know that.
Yes.
Well,
I'll tell you, my husband, he has a small plane, and it's like, plane, boat, same difference, except that for his birthday, I bought him his car license plate is the registration number of the airplane, because the back of the airplane always has the big numbers. His registration number is his license plate. He was so pleased.
Oh, that's awesome.
What a wife I am. Oh.
That's really cool. I love that. Well, as we kind of start wrapping up here today, Fran, anything that we haven't touched on, or any kind of final thoughts for folks who are interested in getting started or looking at getting started?
I mean, this book is, it's horses, obviously, your guide to loving horses, midlife and beyond. But the overall thing that I hope comes across in the book and in this conversation, we've kind of lived towards horses, and I'm hoping people, this sounds like fun, but that don't limit yourself. If for horses don't interest you, but you want to try to go skiing or snowboarding or scuba. My father-in-law got his scuba certification at 70. So, or to learn a new language. As one lady said, she wants to learn Spanish. Go learn Spanish. To not limit yourself to somebody else's preconceived object. I went to an all-girls Catholic school in the 70s. You were going to be a teacher, you were going to be a nurse, or you were going to be a nun, or you were going to get married. And we don't need to do that anymore. We can look and do whatever we want. I know people that I live near in a university town, and they've managed to work some things that I can go audit classes. And almost any field, they'll open it up so that you can go audit something, not necessarily to get a degree, but if you've always been interested in chemistry, go take the chemistry course. And I think that's the thing that I hope comes across, that we have no limits, no reservations. Just go what you want to try. And if it doesn't work out, who cares? We're past the stage where we have to do something and get approval, or it has to work, because if it doesn't work, you'll look like less of a person. I think you're more of a person if you try something, even if you fall on your face, because you tried it and you had fun doing it. And that's what the first lady who hiked the entire Appalachian Trail, she was 65 years old and just threw a backpack on her back and up she went. Go for it.
Love it. Love it. Well, Fran, that is I love that spirit. That is a great place to wrap up here. So, where can people find you? Where can they find the book?
Yes, the book, it's www.ridersofacertainage.com. That'll take you to the website. You can order it right off there. It has more information. You can download a sample of the book from that site so you can see whether or not it's something you're really interested in. And that's fabulous. Would love that. And that's a good place to start. There is also a Facebook page of the same name. It's a small group. I'm just getting it started, so there's not a lot there yet because I'm still figuring out all this social media stuff, but I'll get there.
Well, that sounds good. And, I've been on the website and I know that there's a ton of information beyond just a chance to order the book. Just for everything we've been talking about, you touch on all those topics and more.
Thank you. This has been fabulous. This was fun.